Okay, we're making biscuits. Biscuits are a quick bread because we're going to use baking powder and a little bit of baking soda to create the rice. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to sift our dry ingredients together. If you don't have a sifter, that's fine. You could just whisk them together, or you could use like a fork to kind of stir them together. 2 cups of flour. So filling it in, sweeping away, right, to level off. All right, 2 cups of flour. And then 4 teaspoons of baking powder. The other way to measure this would be to do 1 tablespoon plus a teaspoon, right? Because there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, but since I have to do a teaspoon anyways, I'm just going to do 4 teaspoons. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you guys are at home, this was already mixed together, the baking soda and baking powder. And then the baking soda, we're doing just 1/4 of a teaspoon, so it's a really small amount. We're mostly relying on the baking powder for our rise. We're using the baking soda is going to react really nicely with the buttermilk to give us a little extra lift. And then 3/4 a teaspoon of salt. So for 3/4 of a teaspoon, you could measure 1/4 of a teaspoon 3 times, or you could do 1/2 a teaspoon plus 1/4 of a teaspoon. 1, 2, and 3.
So I have a question.
Yes.
We can just put it all in the bowl and then mix it instead of sifting it?
Yes.
And then we're only using the 1 container to add with the flour after we measure it?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Making sure.
Yeah.
At home watching later.
Yeah. So I believe I already sifted everything for you guys when I was measuring because the baking soda was super chunky. Yeah, so I'm just sifting to get the last little chunks out of mine. You guys could just add it together and like stir it with a fork. You could stir it with a whisk. It's just something to kind of mix it all up, right? Make sure any big lumps are out of there, stuff like that. So that's really easy, right? Flour, baking powder, baking soda, salt in a bowl, mix it together. Then we're going to add in 1/4 cup of butter. So 1/4 of a cup is also 4 tablespoons. So what you want to do whenever you're doing the biscuit method for something is to make sure that your fat is really cold, because we're relying on the fat to create these nice flaky pockets in our product. And so what I'm going to do is use my bench scraper. You could use a knife to just cut this into a couple not bites, like just little pieces, like this size, nothing crazy. I'm just going to drop it in there. So what you want to try to do is avoid using your fingers as much as possible because you don't want to warm up your butter. Okay, so then we got to get in here with our hands. Now you could use I'm just showing you what this is. This guy here, it's not brass knuckles. This is a pastry blender, and it actually is sharp. This one's not as sharp as some of my other ones, but this is what you could, you could use for doing the biscuit method. So you could use this to force that fat into flour to create the chunks and then kind of like stir and press. The official way to do this is with the classical technique is to do this with your hands, and this is what I want you guys to do, and to do like a rub. They always said in school in France, the chefs would be like, to rub like money. So you rub it like this to cut the butter into the flour until it resembles like pea-sized pieces, okay? And you want to work relatively quickly, so you're just going to force the fat into small pieces into the flour.
You cut them? They're just like these big squares?
Yeah, they're like big squares.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just big squares. It helps it so that you can incorporate them quicker than like a big chunk of butter, right? And then so you do this rubbing motion. You kind of press your thumb into it, into your finger, right? So you're pressing your thumb like down into your middle and pointer finger to rub like money, until you don't really want any like too big of pieces. You want them about peas. So it should be kind of crumbly. And you just force it in. It can be like oddly tiring in a way, depending on how much you're doing, because it kind of can put like a lot of pressure in your fingers, and a lot of people don't have strong fingers because we don't do manual labor as much as we used to. So you just kind of work it in, rubbing in this motion. Okay, until you have these nice like crumbles, right? You shouldn't have any really big pieces, but you definitely don't want to overmix, okay? And you don't want to go too slowly, and you don't want to work it unnecessarily, like too much, because you can melt the butter. Okay, so I have my nice mixture like this. I'll give you guys a second to catch up while I make my buttermilk. So for my milk, I'm going to do a cup of milk. And you want your milk to be nice and cold. And then a teaspoon of vinegar. And that acid is going to curdle the milk. You could also do a teaspoon of lemon juice. Would be fine too. And if you're doing vinegar, make sure you guys are using white vinegar.
Wait, miss, you told me a tablespoon.
Teaspoon. It's going to be okay either way. It'll be fine. You just want at least something. So, and then you kind of just let this sit for just a little bit to allow the milk proteins to clump together and to curdle a little bit. And don't worry if your fingers are still dirty, because we're going to use our hands to add in the milk. And so the reason it's so important to have these nice little pea-sized pieces, I don't know, my hands are kind of dirty if you guys can see that, nice small piece, is it's going to create, so those little pieces of fat, what happens is in your biscuits, you're going to have all these nice little pieces of butter, right? And as the butter melts, it separates out into basically like water and fat. And the water, as it gets hot, it starts to evaporate, right? And so the water is evaporating and it's creating steam, and that steam is going to create these awesome little pockets of lift in our biscuit. So we're going to get rise from the chemical leavener, from the baking powder and baking soda, and then we're going to get these flaky pieces from the butter, from those chunks of butter, right? It's the same in a pie crust, where you have these like intentional pockets of butter that create these extra little poofs and flakes within your crust. Really, really key to making a good crust or a good biscuit is to have those pockets of butter. And when we're working our biscuits, you should be able to see the pockets of fat like in the biscuit dough. And those little dots are going to make awesome poof as the water evaporates and creates steam in there. Okay. So you guys should have your flour butter mixture, right? And then we just have our milk, our buttermilk. So yeah, mine looks nice in chunks. Sweet. So what I'm going to do is kind of slowly drizzle this in. and use my hand to stir all around. Make a nice dough here. Okay. And just kind of work this a little bit, not too much, okay? Right? Like we don't want to work it too much where we mix it all together. It's a little wet. So what I'm going to do is add some flour to my counter space to work it out. So you guys should have approximately like half a cup of flour left, I think, if you measured your 2 cups, right? So I'm going to take my flour and I'm going to sprinkle it on the counter, right, on the surface, and then I'm going to turn this biscuit dough out onto that. Okay, so I have this nice biscuit dough, and then let's put a little bit of flour on the top. Okay, and then what we're going to do is fold it. So you kind of press it out, and then you're going to fold it in half, rotate it 90 degrees, press it into a round again, fold it in half, rotate. I had a little bit too much flour, so I'll kind of push that aside. And again, press it, fold it in half, rotate, kind of press it out. I'm going to just do it like one more time. I'm going to fold it and rotate. So 3-4 times of pressing it and folding it. Then once you get to your final pass, I'm going to press it till it's about 1 inch thick. And you should be able to see like these really nice specks of butter. So you want it about 1 inch thick. Don't overwork your dough. If you see, I'm not like kneading my dough. I'm just kind of quickly pressing it, folding it, turning it, right? Then I'm going to take my cutter. So whatever you're using, whether it's an actual cutter like this, it could be a cup, right? A clean can that doesn't have any like metal shavings around the edge. I'm actually going to make them about this size. All right, and then you just, if your cup sticks, you could flour it to make sure that it doesn't get too much. And you're just going to try to maximize space, because the more you work your dough, the worse off your biscuits are going to be. So really cut them nice and close together. The first pass, you're always going to have better quality biscuits on that first pass. They're never going to be as good for the other like go rounds, right? So you want to try to get as many biscuits as you can out of your first pass. And you should be able to see the difference. Like you'll know in the oven once they start baking which ones you did first and which ones you did second. Okay, so I have my biscuits together. What you want to do for the scraps is kind of bring them together. Like you can fold them together a little bit, and then, but don't overwork it again, right? And then make your little pile. Cut out. Try to get 2 more. Okay. So I got 2 more, 6, 8, 10. You should get about 10 to 12 would be a goal, depending on the size of your biscuits, right? And then this last one, I'm kind of just going to put it together. It's going to be like, it's not going to look that great, but it's going to be fine, right? I'll eat that one. Okay. And then we want to clean up our mess. So I kind of had like an aggressive amount of flour. Probably didn't need quite so much flour there. You just want a dusting of flour to keep everything from sticking, right? So I don't know. It was maybe like a couple tablespoons on the bottom and a couple tablespoons on the top, right? That was about all you really needed. Okay, Then I'm gonna take my tray and put the biscuits on it. Perfect. I'm gonna let them sit for just a couple, oops, that was silly. Set my tray on there. So I'm gonna let them rest for just a moment before I put them in the oven. But pretty easy, right? Yeah.
Remember the sugar?
The sugar's not for the biscuits.
It's not?
No.
What is that for?
The sugar should be, what is it in? Like a little tin?
Yeah, it's in one of the plastic things. Because it was in there, I was like, oh my god, I forgot an ingredient. I was like, oh snap.
What is it? Is it labeled as sugar?
No, it's just sugar in there.
You tasted it?
No.
Is it salt?
Oh my gosh. It's salt. Oh my gosh.
Okay, add your salt in. Did you add it?
No.
Just
put it on the dough.
sprinkle a little bit on the top. It's gonna be fine.
Are you sure? Cause oh my gosh, I thought it was sugar the whole time.
No sugar. I think, yeah, that must have been salt.
So I can just put it into my dough and like just pour it on there, just knead it in, I guess.
What step are you at?
I'm at making the dough.
Like, have you cut it?
Cause I think I can explain what.
Are you in the folding process?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just like sprinkle it in, like from a very high height.
Okay.
So you're not,
All of it?
yeah, like sprinkle it and then maybe do a fold and then like sprinkle a little bit more.
This is so bad.
It's gonna be okay.
Okay, can you mute me? Oh, you can't. Dang it. Flower got on my computer and I can't mute myself. It's like the thing is acting really wonky.
Oh. Give me just a second and I'll mute you. Okay. All right. And so these are gonna go into the oven for, I don't know, 15 minutes. You want them lightly golden brown, not super, super brown, okay? Just like a light golden brown. And then when they come out of the oven, they should be nice and risen, like nice and tall. They should have light golden brown color. And then you could brush them with like melted butter if you wanted. You don't have to, but that's just like a little extra thing if you wanted to when they come out of the oven, like brush them with a little extra butter.
No butter.
Okay. And yeah, that's all. Cool. So let me